Good morning. Happy Pentecost. I want to take a few moments as we begin this reflection on Pentecost Sunday to look back to Easter. It's been 50 days since Easter. It's hard to imagine. Since we didn't celebrate Easter together, it seems like Easter is so far away. But I want to take a few moments to look back to Easter because it's important to note that Easter was about life. Jesus had suffered and died, and God stood with him in the midst of that suffering and death. But Easter is the promise of life, is the promise of life transformed. And so on this Pentecost Sunday, as we look back to Easter, it's important to realize that life matters to us. It really does. Here we are in the midst of this pandemic, watching news stories of various riots and troubles in the cities of our country. But I want to reflect upon the way that Easter is about life. And so that means that life matters. It really does. Every black person's life matters. Every gay or lesbian's life matters. Every refugee and immigrant, their life matters. That's what Easter tells us, that life is valuable and sacred and holy. And so therefore, all life matters. And we have to stand firm in that. That's what Easter is about, not just about resurrection, but the way that our view and our understanding of the world and life and our own individual dignity and the dignity of every person is changed and transformed. And so Easter reminds us, tells us, challenges us to value the sacredness and dignity of life. Every life, even the life of those we disagree with, even the lives of our enemies. So any attempt to demean or degrade or diminish anyone's life stands in contradiction to Easter, stands contrary to the vision of the reign of God and the dignity of life. So as we look back to Easter 50 days ago, we have to strongly affirm life matters. Again, every black life matters. Every gay or lesbian life matters. Every unborn child's life matters to us. Life is sacred and holy, and therefore life matters to us. So what about Pentecost? The Acts of the Apostles tells us that the disciples and the mother of Jesus, Mary, were gathered in, guess what, the upper room. There we are, right back to where we began at Easter. Perhaps they're less fearful than they were 50 days ago at Easter, but they're still in that upper room, gathered together, probably wondering what's going to happen now. Here they were 50 days later. And then the Acts of the Apostles tells us that a mighty wind blows into the room. I can't help but think about the story of Genesis, where we're told at the beginning of creation that a mighty breath, a mighty wind of God swept over the chaos of the universe and began to form life, that it was ordered into the way that God intended it to be. And so they were gathered in that room. A mighty wind sweeps over them, and it says that it appeared the tongues of fire. And while fire can be destructive, and here we are in the northern suburbs of Phoenix, fires are threatening homes in the desert. But a mighty wind and a burst of flame, it kindles, lights, ignites, and that's what the idea of Pentecost is about. The mighty hoo-ha of God blows across creation, and what was chaos is now ordered, is now gathered together into the very presence and the life of God. We're told in the Gospel of John today that Jesus has indeed sent the advocate for us, the Spirit, the breath of God, the very powerful presence of God that tells us, remember Easter, that God is in the midst of our suffering with us. And so Pentecost is a feast about difference. The first letter to the Corinthians tells us that because the Spirit blows amongst us, that there is a wide diversity and multiplicity of gifts and talents and skills. And the purpose of that diversity and multiplicity is for the common good, meaning Not just my good, not just my purpose and intention, but the common good of every person. And most likely, the common good of those who are the most vulnerable, those who are at the edges and the margins, those who are indeed today victims of racism and bigotry and hatred and prejudice. That the difference that Pentecost makes motivates, inspires, ignites us to go into the world and make a difference, to overturn the powers that divide and separate us, overturn them in such a way, no, that we rejoice in their defeat, but to overturn them so that we can point them to life, to God. Pentecost is about difference and making a difference in the world. And I guess today I want to challenge us to make a difference. It's hard over these 50 days when we've been sequestered in our homes and social distance. It's hard to think about how we can make a difference, but we can. And as I've always said, it begins with us. It begins with our minds making a difference in what we think and what we believe and what we understand about the world around us. That if Easter is about life, then the difference that our minds have to say is that the norm is not death, is not fear, is not hatred. The norm is life and the goodness of every person and the dignity of every person. That's the difference that has to begin with us. And then in our guts, not just our heart, but in our guts, we have to have the motivation, the desire, the commitment to make sure that in the world, today, tomorrow, in the coming months, in the coming years, that we are agents of difference. Difference, again, in the sense that we turn the tables on hate and anger and prejudice and invite in the breath of God that renews and reconnects and restores us in the fullness of God's life. That's what Pentecost is about. It's not about a white dove fluttering around and we go, oh, look at the Holy Spirit. Pentecost is about looking to Easter, remembering that it's about life, not about death. And Pentecost then gives us the courage, the motivation, the commitment to make a difference with that gift of life for the world. So today, I want to challenge you. When we hear the news reports of the riots and all of the troubles that our cities have experienced, and we think of all the troubles around the world, gosh, we've got great resources. We were worried about having enough toilet paper, for God's sake. What about the rest of the world that doesn't even have indoor restrooms, or the privileges that we have to access even the internet? When here in our own state, much of the Navajo reservation is without electricity, without running water, without the internet. No wonder they've had such a high incidence of COVID-19. We are privileged here in Phoenix. Even the poorest of our poor is still privileged in many ways. You see, that's where the difference begins to happen for us. To not take advantage of that privilege, but to give away the privilege so that in understanding how we are all one in God, how all these multiplied gifts and diversity of gifts are for the common good, meaning that what is good for the other will always be good for me. Boy, that's a big difference that we have to make, isn't it? What's good for the other is always going to be good for me. That's a big difference in our way of thinking and understanding and believing. So the prayer on Pentecost is, come, Holy Spirit. Come, Holy Spirit, and kindle within us the fire and passion of love. Kindle within us the divine sense of shalom, of peace, of restoration, of harmony and balance. Come, Holy Spirit, fill us with the fire and passion of your love. God's love, so that in taking that love into the world will be different. It will look different. It will behave and act differently. It will accomplish fantastic things for everyone. Look at the 2,000 years of history that the Spirit has been with us. Oh, there's been troubles and dark places in the life of our church community. But today, we can make a difference. Today, our church can make a difference, even from the quiet place of our homes. All of us can make a difference. Happy Pentecost to you. Continue to pray for all of those in care homes and all of those in places of fear. Invite them out by way of the Spirit to find joy and love and peace. That's it. That's what Pentecost is about. Come, Holy Spirit, and kindle within us the fire and passion of God's love. You're constantly in my prayers, many blessings and prayers this Pentecost. And as we celebrate the Pentecost season from this point until the start of Advent, may the Spirit of God be with us to enrich, enliven, energize, and ignite the fire of the reign of God in our lives.